Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest trends in college admissions. My name is Micaiah Jackson, and I'm the Senior Program Manager in the Office of Strategic Programming and Partnerships at the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. We're thrilled to have you join us online for this expert-led workshop series tailored specifically for advanced learners in grades 9 and above, as well as their parents and caregivers. Throughout our sessions, we'll tackle some of the most pressing topics in college admissions. Thank you for being here, and let's get started. At this time, I'm pleased to hand everything over to our expert from CollegeWise, Kevin McMullen.
Thanks, Micaiah, and thanks to everybody for joining us, especially on a day when I know that so many of the students are officially out of school. To spend some time with us today to learn more about college admissions is a real privilege for us, and we feel an appropriate amount of pressure to make this worth your while. So on that note, I'm going to keep my introductions mercifully brief so we can get right to the 30 or 40 minutes of presentation, and then we'll get to answering any questions that you have during that time. So just a little bit about CollegeWise. And again, I promised I'd be brief. CollegeWise is a national college admissions counseling and tutoring company that I founded in 1999. So in 1999, I started this little business driving to students' houses, and I worked with 9 students that fall. We sat at their kitchen tables and completed college applications together. And 26 years later, CollegeWise has worked with more than 30,000 students to help them get admitted to the colleges of their choice. We have more than 150 college counselors on our staff, and much of what I'm going to be sharing today, especially around insights for students about how you can improve your chances of admission at your chosen colleges, much of this comes from the college counselors we've hired away from admissions offices to come and join us. And really our goal in working with the students that we work with in our programs, and we have, as I mentioned, tutoring programs to help students raise their grades and improve their standardized test scores, but we also have college counselors who really act as partners with the families they're assigned to. They work very closely one-on-one with the students to help them do everything from choose appropriate classes to plan effective summers, selecting appropriate activities, identifying appropriate colleges to apply to. And as we're doing right now with all of our seniors in the program, we really act as project managers of that work. We don't do the applications or the essays for them for obvious reasons, but we're right in there with them, making sure that everything goes as smoothly and thoughtfully as possible. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today about the latest trends in college admissions, much of this comes from work that our college counselors do at the end of every season. That at the end of every season, we tally all of our admissions results, who applied where did they get in, where did they not get in, and also we tally and identify the more nuanced versions of sort of what are we noticing. So we worked with more than 1,100 students last year to help them apply to college. At the end of all of that, with all of those 150 plus college counselors, we have a learning and development team that looks over all of those results and identifies trends that we're seeing in college admissions. And much of that is going to be what I'm sharing with you today. Just a couple quick housekeeping items. First, everyone will receive a recording of the session, as Micaiah mentioned. Zoom does have a hand-raising function. Unfortunately, during a webinar, if you use the hand-raising function, I can see your hand being raised, but I don't have the ability to call on you. So it's like we're making you be that person in a class that keeps raising your hand and the teacher never calls on you. I don't want you to be frustrated like that. So please, instead of raising your hand, use the Q&A function within Zoom, and that will allow you to submit a question on the fly as we're going here. They will be stored using the Q&A function, and then when we finish the overall presentation, we're going to leave about 20 minutes to answer your questions, and we'll scroll through there and we'll see what sorts of questions people have. So if it's appropriate, I'll try to answer some along the way, but mostly I want to make sure I get through this information, and we'll save the questions for the end. And as I mentioned, I founded CollegeWise today. I'm the Chief Education Officer, which means that I participate in everything from the recruiting and hiring and training of counselors to overseeing our counseling programs to doing webinars like this one. So I've been in college admissions in some form or another for more than 30 years, And my favorite thing to do is to get to teach families about the college admissions process to make it less chaotic, less confusing, and hopefully inject some optimism in a time that can be increasingly stressful. So I want to make sure that I'm able to do that for you today. As we're jumping in here, my colleague Belinda is going to share a quick poll with everybody. Let me get that off the shared screen here, just to get a sense of the types of topics that are on your mind right now. And this will give us a good sense of what to focus on when we get to the questions at the end. So we're going to give you just a second here to complete this, and then I'm going to jump into my first trend. We're just about at our good information here, and at under 7 minutes intro time, that puts us right on schedule. Appreciate everybody being patient and participating in our poll here. Yep, so I'm seeing a lot of understanding what colleges really want in applications. That's roughly 88% of our respondents right now. In fact, it's not even a close second after that. Everything else is 3 or 4%, which doesn't mean that we won't be talking about those other things, but thank you for participating. This is really helpful. This lets us know that we're sort of on the right track with what we want to be sharing with you. Now, as you're finishing the poll, sorry, get that off our screen here. As you're finishing the poll here, I want to say something before we start, because when we talk about trends in college admissions, typically these are going to be sort of representative of so much of the stress and chaos and confusion that is happening right now within college admissions. And it would be unfortunate and inaccurate if people came away from this webinar thinking, it's so hard just to get into college today. Everything is so confusing. Everything is so complicated. This is what I should expect no matter where I go to college. So I want to just take my 60 seconds here to remind everyone before we jump in. The United States has the most open and accessible system of higher education anywhere in the world. We have more than 2,500 four-year colleges and universities in the United States, and the vast majority of them accept pretty much everybody who applies. More than 80% of the colleges in this country take more than 50% of their applicants, meaning they're taking the majority of people who apply. In fact, and I was an English and history major, math was never my thing, but even I can understand this statistic. Looking at the acceptance rates for colleges across the country, if you took the average acceptance rate, it's 75%. So that means there are schools that admit a lot fewer than 75% of their students, but there are also schools that admit a lot more than that. And so it's not, overall, it's not difficult to get into college in the United States. Among those 2,500 colleges, there are roughly 100 to 150 that would be defined as selective. These are schools that are turning away more students than they admit. And in that 100 to 150, there are about 60 that are highly selective. These are the most famous colleges. These are the most prestigious colleges. We'll be referencing them frequently in this webinar because they are the ones for whom all of this information and these trends are true for. There are some cases where they'll be affecting the other schools, but I really want to make that distinction here because so much of the anxiety in college admissions today comes from this belief that it's impossible to get in anywhere. And it also comes from this belief that in order for me to succeed after college, I must attend a famous, prestigious college or university. And folks, I'm here to tell you, at CollegeWise, we work with A students, C students, and everyone in between. One of our core beliefs is going to college is incredibly important. We believe in the transformative power of higher education. But what a student does while they are in college will ultimately be much, much more important than whether or not that school was prestigious or famous. And so I would never tell a student, aim lower, don't dream big, don't work as hard. That's the opposite of what we should be doing. I want you to reach for the schools that you really want to attend, but I also want everyone on this webinar to remember that college is much more accessible here than the press would have you believe, and that many webinars like this one would have you believe. So overall, the news is good. And while I'm consistently referring to selective colleges, to highly selective colleges, that's not code for the best schools. Great educations and college experiences take place at lots of colleges, including not the famous ones. But we're here to talk about trends in admissions, and disproportionately, those affect the more famous colleges, like this first trend that we're going to talk about here. The first three are all going to be about standardized tests. Standardized tests are in the midst of changing again. Now, by the way, all of these tips and trends I'm going to share, we could do, half a webinar on them, but I'm going to do sort of rapid fire and go through them so we leave enough time for questions. Every 5 or 6 years, standardized tests, the most important ones for admission are the SAT and the ACT. Every 5 or 6 years, they change. And the reason why they change is these are competing companies. They don't work for the colleges, by the way. These are profit-making companies that are creating these tests to be used as part of the college admissions process, and colleges use the tests. And so they change the tests to compete with each other, but also to be more user-friendly. They change them based on college institutional priorities and what schools are looking for. So for example, last year, the SAT rolled out their digital SAT, where instead of sitting in a room filling out, bubbles with a number 2 pencil, students began going to testing centers and taking the test on a computer. This year, the ACT is rolling out what they call the enhanced ACT, which is essentially the same test they had before, but it's a little bit shorter. There are fewer questions. It has a more modern approach. It's a little bit more student friendly, and they're rolling it out in phases in both a paper and pencil and the digital format. And so with these change in tests brings an increased focus on tests because students want to make sure they're not missing anything. And at the same time, more colleges are still test optional, but others are bringing them back. So I mentioned at the beginning, there are 2,500 colleges in the country. 1,800 roughly of those schools don't care about test scores. They either say, we don't want them at all, don't even bother sending them to us. If you do, we won't look at them. Those are test blind schools. Or they're saying, if you want to send us scores because you have scores you're proud of and you think they'd be a positive addition to your application, send them to us and we'll evaluate them. If you don't want to send us test scores, don't. You won't be at a disadvantage. That's what test optional is. The reason this is notable that others are bringing them back is that pre-COVID, there was a larger percentage of colleges that required standardized tests. When COVID hit and students couldn't take standardized tests, a whole bunch of colleges, especially the highly selective and selective ones on that list of roughly 100 schools, said, we're not going to look at test scores because it's not fair. Students can't be taking the test. Well, now we're outside of COVID, and unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because standardized testing it's one part of the application process where, it takes disproportionate time and energy from students to address these things. I would much rather have a student be spending more time playing on the soccer team or working on their poetry or practicing their violin than preparing for a standardized test. Unfortunately, many of the most famous colleges are bringing back their testing requirements. And when they're bringing back these testing requirements, and they're either going from test blind to test optional, or they're now requiring these tests, and it's all the most famous prestigious schools. It's schools like the Ivy League and Stanford and Duke and Georgetown, and you know the names of them, right? And you can look this up on any college admissions website, any college's admissions section of their website. As they are bringing more of these tests back, because the most famous schools tend to wag the dog in college admissions, as a consequence of this, we are seeing more students who are electing to report test scores to colleges, even at those schools that don't require test scores, because these students are bringing test prep back into their college planning. Because they're planning to apply to colleges that are requiring these scores, we're seeing bigger submissions and greater percentages of submissions, even from students that might ultimately not need to submit them to their chosen colleges. So this is one of those things that we talk about because it's a trend. It's something that we're seeing. There's not something you can do here to take advantage of this trend other than, actually, I guess I should say there are 2 things you could do. If standardized testing is not your strength, consider applying to schools that are test optional or test blind. A great website to go to is fairtest.org. The word fair, the word test, fair, F-A-I-R, that version of fair, fairtest.org. maintains a list of colleges that either don't look at test scores at all or have them as optional. If you're not a good standardized test taker, that is one route you can go. If you are a good standardized test taker, or if you've practiced and done your prep and you become a good standardized test taker, you could choose to apply to schools that are now allowing you to submit test scores. But overall, this is a trend that we're seeing as a result of tests making a comeback post-COVID. Now, with all of this happening, we're also seeing a greater academic emphasis. What exactly does that mean? Well, I think that I forget the exact statistic, but I think in the 90s, it was something like 4% of applicants had 4.0 GPAs when they applied. And now it's more than 60% of students, particularly in the pools at the 100 or 150 or so selective colleges. Students have more access to college planning information. More schools have honors classes and AP classes that are getting an extra grade point for students. We're seeing, more students are engaging with tutoring, and they're just sort of focusing more on their college prep, which means that colleges, coincidentally now, are looking more to students' academic work. So what this means for the students here, colleges will evaluate the rigor of your coursework based on what was available at your high school. So if you go to a high school where there are no AP classes offered, you're not penalized for not taking AP classes that were never available to you. If you go to a school where there are honors or AP courses, colleges are going to want to know, well, how many of them did you take? And the more competitive the school you want to go to, the greater the expectation is that you will take close to or up to the most difficult course curriculum that's available at your school. Most of the colleges in this country do not expect that a student will take the hardest classes that are available to them, but the more competitive the school, the more selective, the more they're going to expect that. So you can show that rigor by doing things like taking honors or AP classes if they're available to you. You can do that by going above and beyond the required number of courses. Like you might take biology and chemistry and then elect to take physics in high school, which you weren't required to do. You might go beyond the minimum 2 years of foreign language and take a third year or a fourth year. You might go on beyond the minimum required math courses and go all the way through pre-calculus or even calculus. These are all things that you can do. We spend a lot of time with our college-wise students giving them personalized recommendations for course planning. The best advice I could give to the masses here is you should always take the most, at a minimum, take the most challenging courses in your favorite subjects, if they are available to you. If you love science and they offer AP chemistry, take AP chemistry. Consider taking that fourth year of physics. If science isn't your thing and you drift more towards the social sciences or English, take that honors English class. Take the AP world history class. Go where your strengths are at a minimum. That will give you a chance to shine more in college admissions. And along with this increased look at the academics, we're also seeing a growing importance of the personal narrative. Colleges aren't just admitting collections of grades and test scores and awards and activities and accomplishments. They're admitting human beings, complex, interesting teenagers that you're not just going to come sit, presumably, in the classes in college. Many students, you're going to live on that college campus. You're going to have a roommate. You're going to be a part of a community. You're going to be participating in class and interacting with professors and contributing to activities and getting involved in things. You're going to be a functioning member of this campus community. And so in addition to knowing what have you accomplished in high school, colleges also want to know, well, who are you? What are your values? What's your background? What makes you tick? What kind of person are we getting if we were to admit you? And so that means that the personal statement is important. Personal statement is sort of a general college essay where you're given a chance to tell a story about your life. That's bringing on more importance in the admissions world. Additional information section on colleges' applications where they can say, is there anything that we don't know about you that you might like to share with us? This is a good place to do that. Supplemental essays are essays that particular colleges require, even when they are part of the common application, which is one application you could use to apply to multiple colleges. And it's the dominant way to apply to college today. Many schools will say, in addition to writing one of the Common App essays that they provide, we have multiple essays that are just for our school that we would like you to write. And also letters of recommendation, which for the more selective schools are a required part of the application process. Frequently, those are you're asked to get one from a school counselor and usually one or two from teachers at your school. And this is an opportunity for the faculty at your high school, your school counselor, and your teachers to speak to who you are, the contributions you've made to your high school. And so this is sort of the intangible parts of college admissions that go beyond this idea of meritocracy, where sort of the highest numbers win. It's going to be, they are going to look at your GPA, they are going to look at, the classes that you took, and if they're requiring test scores, reviewing them, they will see those. But they're also want to get a sense of what have you done in high school and how does this inform our impressions of you as a human being and who we would be getting if we brought you to this campus. And that's actually good for students. We think that anything that makes the application process more personal, that gives you a chance to share your stories and your perspective, that's ultimately student friendly. We view this as a good shift in college admissions as opposed to moving away from that and looking at things that I've never met. I mean, I've been doing this college-wise 26 years and admissions more than 30. I've never met a teenager that was entirely encapsulated by their transcript and their test scores. There's more to these human beings than that, and colleges want to take the time to learn more about them. Okay, a rise in institutional priorities. What exactly does that mean? Well, colleges are ultimately businesses, right? Like they need customers to come there. So while they've got the more famous colleges have all these people applying, but not all of those students are ultimately going to come. Some of them are going to be admitted and choose to attend other schools. And colleges have all these needs on their college campuses. So they need to make sure there are enough students in the physics department. If they have a marching band to march during the football team's games, they need to make sure that they've got enough tuba players in the marching band. They need to make sure that they have people who want to participate in student governments. They have different things that they need to fill, right? And so I mentioned intended majors here because this is something that colleges pay attention to. Certainly there are more popular majors on college campuses, but they also want to make sure that the majors they're offering have students who are legitimately interested in them. It's not a backdoor for admission to try to apply under a major that's less popular. Colleges can see through that, but it certainly is an institutional need to make sure they've got enough of those students. Legacy status. A legacy is someone whose parents went to this particular school. There's been a trend over the last 10 years or so of schools backing away from that a little bit because from the school's perspective, it's inequitable. And there's no guarantee that that student is necessarily going to be a better contributor or a better fit for that college just because their parents went there. But now with the shifts that we're seeing with Department of Education funding cuts, schools are sort of concerned a little bit more about self-preservation, and they rely on alumni donations. And so if they've got a loyal alumni and a parent that went there that's loyal to the school, the colleges will sometimes see a strategic element of bringing in more of these alumni's children to ensure that they keep their alumni involved and maybe donating. And also the geographic diversity is going to be really important. Colleges, by and large, are committed to bringing in different perspectives, different backgrounds. They think it makes for a more interesting environment to live and learn during college. And there's a lot of shifting right now happening for particular groups, identifying where they feel they might feel comfortable and even safe on college campuses. And so we're going to see more of colleges sort of looking at, are we in a state where more of our own students from this state are going to elect to go someplace else because they don't feel like they're necessarily going to be safe on this campus? Or are we the reverse of that? Are we seeing that we're going to get more out-of-state applicants coming here because they feel that this will be a more friendly environment for them? So we're going to see changes in that geographic diversity. We're at the forefront of this right now. We don't know how that's going to play out, but it is something that we see becoming more prevalent and will be more prevalent in the next couple years. All right, watching my time here, I think I'm on a good pace to make sure that I leave enough time for questions. And I'm seeing that we have a bunch that are flowing in right now. So thank you for doing that. Keep them coming, and we'll try to answer some along the way. Belinda is in the background answering some of these, and I'll try to tackle some of the more common ones when we get to the more popular ones when we get to the end. All right, AI is influencing everything right now, right? So it is, in fact, making its way to college admissions, both in healthy and unhealthy ways. For students, AI can be a wonderful college research shortcut. When you want to know which colleges in the United States have the greatest percentage of international students applying, that's something you want to know, it will spit back an answer to you right away. I'm looking for colleges that have fewer than 15,000 students and also offer competitive business majors. I would prefer to go to college in the Southwest. What's available to me? And it will come back with a list for you. It might not be infallible, but it'll be pretty close. Those are healthy ways to use AI. And we are seeing some colleges, particularly on that list of selective schools, begin to use AI to do the types of things that AI can do. So AI can do things like calculate a GPA for a student. And by the way, I know of no colleges anymore that just look at a GPA as it is calculated on a transcript and accept it at face value. Every college recalculates your GPA using their own factors. They will find a way to reward those students who have challenged themselves and maybe have taken honors or AP classes. So there tends to be a real fixation on things like, well, how do I know that colleges are going to give me that extra grade point for that harder class I took? Or at my school, honors English doesn't get an extra grade point, so I don't know if I want to do that. If it is a more challenging class, an extra grade point is just one way that a college can reward you for doing that. It is not the only way. But they can use AI to do those. AI can essentially do anything that you can write out instructions for, right? So they can write out instructions for that. They can use it to do sort of a preliminary review of applications. But the truth is, as I mentioned before, these colleges are admitting human beings. And the only way to really evaluate the human being that's going to be entering the class is to have a human being do the evaluation. So we're not seeing AI replace the thoughtful review and discussion and debate of admissions officers, but we are seeing it to help them manage the application volume a little bit better, which will hopefully allow them to keep spending the personal time that they do on these classes, on these applications. Now, this is an interesting one, or at least we like to geek out on this stuff at CollegeWise, right? So 10.2 million applications submitted in 2025. Well, why is that interesting to us? Because it has increased. The total number of applications submitted to colleges has increased by roughly 5 million applications in the last 5 years. That's a staggering increase of applications. There are two punchlines to this. First of all, the number of applicants has not dramatically increased. It's just the number of applications. So this means students are applying to more colleges. And they are doing this because they're applying to more colleges in the face of admissions uncertainty. They're hearing all this bad news about how difficult it is to get in, particularly to these selective schools. And in many cases, what students are doing is saying, well, as a response to that, I'm just going to put in more applications, almost like they're playing the lottery. I'm going to apply to more of these schools, which will then increase my chances of admission. That's generally not an effective strategy to do that, especially if you're getting good advice from a school counselor or a qualified college counselor like someone at CollegeWise. That generally you want to try to have a balanced list where you're applying to a few schools where your chances of admission may not be as strong, but you really want to go there. You're applying to a few where we would go into cardiac arrest if you weren't admitted, and then a few that are somewhere in the middle. But what this reflects is sort of one of the many outcomes of college admissions anxiety is we have students uncertain about their admissions chances applying to more schools. So that's punchline number one, is the number of applicants has not changed that much, but the number of applications has gone up dramatically. Surprise number two, 70% of that application increase was to the highly selective colleges. to those roughly 60 to 80 colleges that are the most difficult to get in. So it's students really, really wanting to go to those schools, applying or sending more applications to more of those schools, but not necessarily more individual students applying to those schools. And that makes it much harder for colleges to manage their application volume. And we'll see some trends in a few minutes that are a result of that. We're reading about this in the press right now. Department of Education funding cuts. And this is an evolving story. We don't yet know what the outcomes are going to be here, but we're seeing some of them right now, and we are predicting we're going to see reductions in financial aid from some sources like Pell Grants, and there was a lot of chaos with the rollout of the new FAFSA form when they rejiggered that, and it was supposed to be more family friendly. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It does seem like they've gotten that mostly under control, but we are also, you're reading in the press about the federal government taking funding away from colleges. Certain programs are being cut. They're having to downsize staff. And in some cases, colleges are going to be relying on increased tuition or even private funding to keep their schools, financially secure. So I think that what this means for students right now is that increasingly, and this has always been good college admissions practice, but it's becoming even more imperative right now. You need to make sure that you apply to at least one or two colleges where your chances of admission are a certainty, as verified by a professional like your school counselor or a qualified independent counselor like someone at CollegeWise. And you want to apply, you want to make sure that those schools are also schools that you would be able to pay for or get close to paying for if you didn't receive the financial aid that you need. It's important to protect yourself in the face of all of these changes. And so I'm going to come back to this theme over and over again. Don't play the lottery of only applying to the most prestigious colleges. Don't play an even riskier lottery where you're applying to a lot of schools that you could never afford unless you got a lot of financial aid. You don't know your financial aid package until you're actually admitted to the college. So there's a little bit of a guessing game here. And I would never want you to take colleges off the table preemptively, but protect yourself and make sure that, whatever your version of a financial safety school is and an admissions safety school is, and safety school has such a negative connotation, unnecessarily so. I love it when a student says, my safety school is one of my first choices. What a great position to be in. But it is important in the face of this uncertainty to protect yourself. You're reading about this in the press right now, that the international student representation in colleges is very likely to change. This is not a political presentation here, but it's just the facts that with the current administration and government, it's becoming a lot more difficult for international students to get student visas to come here. There is a lot of concern for international students that if they were to come here to go to college, they might not be able to stay here to finish the degree if the rules were to change. And there's a justifiable concern that there might be colleges they go to where they won't feel necessarily safe and secure on campus. Now, naturally, the question that usually comes back here, and I love that you're thinking about this, a common question then is, will the schools that traditionally have a lot of international student reputation representation, will they now become easier to get admitted to? I don't expect that to be the case, and here's why. It's almost like the most famous prestigious colleges are immune to everything that might seem like it would make it easier to get in. When there's a recession in place, they get just as many applications, if not more so. If there are fewer international students applying, there'll be just as many, if not more, domestic students applying. So the most famous and prestigious colleges generally don't get easier to get into, no matter what seems to happen in admissions. But if you are doing research on your colleges, and if you're applying to a school that might not be one of the highly selective ones that traditionally has a large percentage of international students on campus, it might be something where they're going to have fewer applications from international students and fewer students from international locations that ultimately decide to attend. And that might, in those cases, make it a little bit easier for those schools to get into. It's just not going to be the case at schools like Brown and Yale and Princeton and NYU, because those are on that list of the most prestigious that are immune to all of this. Now, as I'm watching my time, I've got about 6 minutes left, and we're going to go into something now that can be a whole webinar in and of itself. So I'm going to have to treat this one briefly. Prioritization of early application deadlines. This is something we are seeing from more and more students. For the uninitiated, the traditional way of applying to college, and it looked this way for years, was most colleges had a deadline of on or around January 1st. You apply before then of your senior year. You would find out in March, roughly, like whether or not you were admitted, and you have until May 1st to make a decision. Well, now lots of these more competitive colleges are offering early application options. They're not the only way. You can still apply under the traditional way, but early application means you usually apply by November 1st, and in return, you find out from these colleges by December 1st or the first week of December. So you get an answer earlier. And there are two kinds, and there are new iterations of both of these, but in general, there are two kinds of early programs. One is early action, which means you do what I just described, and then you can still wait until you hear from all your other colleges and then decide where you want to go. The other kind, and these aren't offered by every school, the other kind is early decision. Early decision is like the arranged marriage of college application. Early decision means when you apply early decision to a college that offers it, you are promising them, if you take me, I will come. I will be there this fall. I will withdraw my applications from all my other colleges. So early decision is an opportunity if you have a first choice college, it's an opportunity for you to make that clear to that college that this is where I want to come. And if you apply by November 1st and you're admitted in the first week of December, you not only know your admissions result, you know where you're going to college now. Now, the sort of reported advantage there is early decision numbers in particular, the admissions rates tend to be much higher. And so a lot of families will take that to mean it's easier to get in. Generally, that's not true at most colleges, but it can be at some. For example, and I forget the specific statistics, but a school like Northeastern University, I think last year they admitted more than 60% of their freshman class from their early pool, where they admitted only 7% of the ultimate class, like when you saw how it all came together towards the end, from the regular pool. So, and this is information that's readily available. You can Google this, you can look on colleges' websites. They will share this information with you. If you find a school that is that you really, really want to go to, that is admitting the vast majority of their applicants, of their freshman class in an early pool, they are sending a very clear message that that's where they're going to go because it helps them protect their eventual enrollments, right? When you apply early decision, I don't have to guess whether or not you're going to ultimately come here if I admit you. So that's a big advantage for those particular students at those particular schools. And so we're seeing more students want to avail themselves of this early application option. It's not something everybody needs to do, but there are particular schools like Northeastern. Vanderbilt is another one where it's a pretty serious disadvantage at these current rates of admission for the early pools. It's a serious disadvantage to apply in a regular school if that school is in fact your first choice. And what this means, because you have more students applying early, is that deferrals have reached an all-time high. Because what happens when you apply early decision or early action, there are three possible outcomes. The college can say yes, the college can say no, or they can say, we're not ready to make a decision on you yet, so we're going to move you from this early pool to our regular pool. That's a deferral. It's like a maybe. It's a we can't make a decision yet. If you applied in a binding early decision program and you get deferred, you're no longer required to go there if they take you. So that promise is, I will promise to come there, but only if you admit me the first time out. Once you go into the regular pool as a deferred applicant, your options open back up again. But we are seeing that deferrals are reaching an all-time high, and we view that as an unfortunate change in college admissions. It's like admissions purgatory to find out, like, well, you're not in, but you're not out yet. We're going to look at you later. There's not really much a student can do about that other than to put together your strongest possible application. And we do work with our college-wide students about steps they can take if they are deferred to really affirm their interest in that school. But this is a consequence of more students applying early. Students are starting college app prep much earlier. they're not doing this out of necessity. You don't need to be writing college essays as a junior in high school necessarily. I mean, you can practice doing it if your English class assigns you to do so. You don't need to know what you want to major in college as a ninth grader, but we're seeing more families that are having these discussions and wanting to talk about this because of all this confusion and anxiety that's become so prominent now. I'm going to do two more of these, and then we're going to fast forward ahead and go to questions. The regional shifts in application pools, we sort of talked about this a little bit with regards to what might be happening in individual states. But every year, the Common Application releases state-specific application data. If you're interested in applying, particularly to colleges in your home state, it's really good to go to the Common Application and just see how many students from your state and from outside your state are trying to go to these schools. Has this been shifting over the last couple of years? You can find access to that data. And then finally, before we move to questions, take better care of the written components of the applications. This is a college-wise tip in relation to that to that trend that I shared earlier. The essays and the personal narrative are incredibly important components in college admissions that we hear so many former admissions officers that now work for us as college counselors talk about things like what they remember about students and what resonated with them as they were reading the applications. And more often than not, it's things they learned via the college essays. And so and I know I don't have to tell students to take parts of their college applications seriously, but if you're a procrastinator, if you tend to keep things till the last minute, please don't do that with the essays as part of the application. The essays are really your chance to stand out, and they're an equal opportunity employer. We see students that are C students, A students, and everyone in between write really compelling, interesting, likable college essays. Everyone's got a story to tell, but you need to take some time to really put some thought into it and to tell the story in the best way. So before we move to questions, I am going to go to one final poll that we have here, which is approximately how many schools do you or your student think you will apply to? By the way, there's no necessarily wrong answer here. We're not going to judge you positively or negatively. We're just curious. So it looks like the winner here by a pretty wide margin is 9 to 12 schools. That's encouraging. That's kind of a healthy number. I said I wasn't going to judge you, but I am doing that. I don't see anything here that is necessarily negative. It is not uncommon for students today to apply to more than 13 schools, especially if they're doing so using the Common Application, or if you're applying to systems like the University of California system, where you use one application and check off which schools you want it to go to. But this is informative here about, it is certainly more colleges in total than students were applying to 10 or 20 years ago. And this really emphasizes my last tip here before we move to questions, which is balanced college lists are now a non-negotiable. That I don't care if you are at the top of your class with perfect standardized test scores, you have found a way to feed the hungry in your community, you invented the proton in high school, you found a cure for athlete's foot, you are the most remarkable college applicant who's ever existed. It's like you were reverse engineered to be the perfect college applicant. You still need a balanced college list. And a balanced college list means you have a few schools that are out of your reach, and out of your reach is not a judgment on you. Out of your reach is, the 60 or so colleges that admit fewer than 20% of their applicants, their reach is for everybody, no matter what you've done. It's just the math. It's unassailable that every applicant has a much greater percentage chance of being denied than they do being admitted. But then there are just as many colleges you can find where your admissions chances are closer to 100%, and then a bunch of schools that are somewhere in the middle. And especially for students who've worked hard in high school, you deserve to have plenty of college options. Optionality is everything in college admissions. Don't do yourself the disservice of only applying to the most selective schools. On that note, Micaiah, I will have you come off before we move to questions here. I think I'm following our recommended flow, which was I will do the question. And actually, I was going to tell them a little bit about college-wise, right? And then you were going to bring me to the questions. So I will do that now.
Perfect.
On this particular page here. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the counselors at CollegeWise and what we do. Rather than giving you a 2-minute pitch here that will cut into our question and answer time, I'm simply going to say that every student who works with CollegeWise they start that process by having a free introductory meeting with one of our program advisors. This is something that the parents do and the students join sometimes. It's a chance for us to learn more about you and what kind of help you might need, and we can talk more about our programs. If you're interested in taking advantage of that, scan this QR code. You can do the same thing if you're watching the recording, and a form will come up to connect you with one of our program advisors. And it's worth mentioning that students who are official CTY students, they get 10% off of college-wise programs. It's part of our partnership with CTY, which really means a lot to us. And you can learn more about CTY by going to this particular page here. On that note, Micaiah, I'll turn it to you before we take questions.
Thank you so much. So we are nearing the end of our session. For those of you viewing the recording on our YouTube page, please remember to mark your calendar. Enrollment opens in early January for CTY's summer 2026 in-person and online courses. Also, the CTY Scholars Program is currently accepting applications for students in 8th grade, and you can learn more on our website. So for those of you joining us live, remain with us for our upcoming Q&A segment, and thank you everyone for attending.
I'll give people a chance in case they're still filling out that form.